Hello chess fans, I am very excited to present a game played by Magnus Carlsen at the World Chess Olympiad, and he is playing in this game with black pieces against a super grandmaster from Vietnam. Their board 1 is Le Quang Liem, rated 2741. He is world's number 12 and a former World Blitz champion. So that's not an easy game for Magnus at all. But Magnus, when he is in form, he can of course beat anyone. In this game, I've picked it because a lot of things are happening. It's solid, positional, but also tactical, sacrifices, and a very cool end of the game as well. So make sure to watch this video from begin till end. And if you do like it, make sure to give this video a like, to hit the subscribe button, and you help the growth of the channel. And I really appreciate all your support, guys. I really need it to pump the channel. So here we go. Le Quang Liem is playing with the white pieces, and the game starts with the move 1d4. Knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3, and c6. So here the game starts off as a Slav opening, characteristic with the move c6, d5, and e6. But after bishop g5, knight bd7, e3, h6, bishop h4, bishop goes back, bishop e7. Black is opting for a very modest, solid setup. And usually white is a bit better because of somewhat more space. But black is rock solid. His position doesn't contain many weaknesses at all. White played the move a3, sort of a useful waiting move. Not really sure it was needed, but well, black also cannot do too much. Look at the cramped position. The bishop on c8 cannot move at this point, but black goes here for the move a6. So in certain cases, there are these plans, maybe to take on c4, and if white recaptures, then you can go b5 and c5, put a bishop on the long diagonal. Black will untangle and have a pretty good game. So that's the moment Le Quang Liem decides here to take on d5. And this is the well-known Carlsbad structure, the typical structure arising from the Queen's Gambit decline. White has an extra pawn in the center, black has one extra on the c-file. And well, this imbalance in the position does give both sides enough hope to play for an advantage. And Magnus feels very comfortable in these sort of structures. Here, black has a very interesting plan. We will get to see after the move queen c2, as Magnus played here knight e8. Why do you think he's going back with his knight? That's not something you would probably have expected. Well, black would really like to welcome more exchanges. So if bishops are coming off the board, it will be easier for black to move around with his pieces. Also, the knight is on its way later to the d6 square. Well, anyway, white keeps the bishops on the board, and black play the move bishop d6, offering the exchange of bishops once again. But white continues with his development. Bishop d3. Now, bishop takes on g3, h takes g3. And very often you do wait with this capture as black, as it opens up the h-file. Sometimes there are maybe attacking chances for the rook, because white hasn't castled yet. Maybe the rook can be employed on this half-open h-file. But as I said, black is rock solid and will now try to come up with a plan to get the bishop into the game. So knight df6 played. And well, now the knight has moved away from the d7 square. White decides here to jump in with his own knight to e5. White does look pretty active, but again, black's pieces, especially now this knight from e8 goes to d6. Black is also rock solid. I do like the black knights. And white has different ways of playing. It's hard to say what white should exactly do, but the move played by white is definitely quite ambitious. He played here the move f3, Le Quang Liem, and that covers the e4 square, also covers the g4 square. Maybe on a good day there are even ideas to go g4, g5, maybe to launch the g-pawn, to open up the h-file for the rook. But black has this plan. Rook e8. So here the rook is already eyeing the king on e1, and of course first the pawn on e3 is still there, but the main plan for black is to challenge that knight on e5. It's an annoying piece. Knight e2 was played, and here the knight goes to d7. A lot of maneuvering, backward moves by black, but the idea is pretty clear. You want to trade the knight on e5, so black is threatening to win a pawn. But look now what happens. Rook h5 played. The rook is developed via this half-open file and defends the knight. Of course, if you do take on e5, now it's pawn takes e5 and the knight on d6 doesn't have a nice square to go to. So black shouldn't feel tempted here to initiate these exchanges, but he can force it by tickling the knight on e5 with the move f6. Very good move. And now, if you do look at black's king side, it does look a bit weak here, the light squares in particular, but there are no concrete ways to exploit it. Like, if you give a check on h7, the king goes to h8, the knight covers the f7 square. If you do go knight g6, you can safely take the bishop, then there's no good discover check here, so you're not going to win any material. So therefore, white has to give up his attacking aspirations and decides here to take on d7, but black is very happy with this exchange, as now black's pieces are coming alive. The rook on e8 is attacking the pawn on e3, therefore white defends it with the move king f2. That was actually sort of a plan when white decided to play the move f3. It was pretty clear that the king would not castle but to go to f2 and support these pawns on the king side. But here black is going to take over the initiative with the move f5. Now he's placing another pawn on a light square, but he's restricting the power of this light squared bishop on d3. And well, there are simple plans here to strengthen the position on the king side. Here, rook e1 was played, so the rook is trying to support the pawn on e3. A super interesting moment here, as we do get to see a very explosive move, maybe a move you would not have expected in this position at all, as Magnus sacrifices the rook on e3, which is a good move. However, the machine says if black is going to play something like queen f6 with the idea to go rook e7 and get the other rook involved, probably black's advantage is even bigger than what he gets in the game. I mean, all the pieces are looking nice, targeting the pawn on e3. There are sometimes ideas to go knight e4 check, because the knight cannot really be taken by the pawn. There's f takes e4 and the queen on f6 is targeting the king on f2. So there are a lot of ideas here also for black to increase the pressure on white's king. Anyway, rook takes e3. It's a good move. Black is winning a pawn after king takes e3. The trick is queen e8 check, double attack, so you regain the rook, king f2, queen takes h5. But usually when you do win material, it also usually comes with some sort of positional concession, as white here is going to play very actively. Queen c5, attacking the knight on d6. The queen goes back to defend the knight. You don't want to move the knight. The knight is fantastically placed on d6. And, well, white cannot profit immediately tactically. Let's say if you go knight f4 to attack the queen, queen got to keep the knight defended. But after queen f6, knight h5, the queen goes back and the knight is still rock solid. Everything well defended. White is a pawn up. So there's no immediate way for white to regain the pawn. But white can look for ways to tie down black's pieces. So here queen b6 was played. The pawn is defended by the knight on d6. Queen f6 played. Queen is somewhat better placed on that square, keeping an eye on this pawn on d4. And well, there are various ways of playing. I do always like a move like knight f4. Think that such a move comes, of course, always into consideration. But here, queen c7 was played first to attack the bishop on d7. The bishop goes back to e8. Looks like the bishop is out of play, but well, still everything defended by black, and the bishop is on its way to f7. White played here knight f4, and that's a tricky moment in the game, because here the pawn on d4 is hanging. Should black take that pawn? Magnus didn't do it, and that's the right decision. If you do take there on d4, even with check, the king will go back to f1, but here you have given up the protection of the knight. The knight cannot go away. If you move the knight, the pawn on b7 will fall. If the queen goes back to f6, it's rook e6 with a double attack, and white is winning even more material. So usually when you're up material, don't be too greedy. One pawn is already good enough, and Magnus comes with a much better move here, as he hits the queen with rook c8. He is kicking the queen out of black's position. It's a kind of annoying piece, so very good move. There's of course no time here for a move like rook e6, Can always take on d4, after which the queen on c7 will be taken. And if you go away with the queen back to b6, then your mission has completely failed. The bishop will come back to f7 to guard that e6 square. Rook e6 has been prevented. And obviously black is a pawn up and will try to find ways to consolidate, initiate the exchange of more pieces. So that's looking great. And of course, Quang Liem understands that and comes up with the following idea. Look at this. Queen takes c8. White is sacrificing the queen for the rook. Knight takes c8. There is rook takes e8. So you get already a first minor piece. But it's also a double attack with check. King f7, and now it's rook takes c8. So here we have this material balance of rook and 2 minor pieces against the queen. That should, normally speaking, be good for white. However, it's black's turn, and black is taking pawn number 1 with check. The king got a move, and you wish you could take here the bishop on d3, but it's defended by the knight. So here g5 is played, and the knight is in trouble, the bishop is in trouble. Looks like you're going to win more material, but have you seen this shot? Rook f8. It's a check. Always look at forcing moves. It's very, very important. And well, of course, Magnus had seen it that he cannot take the rook. There is knight e6 with a knight fork. You're winning the queen. So that is the first pitfall. And the second one is that if you move the king to g7, there's of course also knight e6 winning the queen. So the only move is king e7. Stay away from the rook, but the threat of the pawn hitting the knight is still in the position. Knight can go now to g6 with check. It defends the rook. The king goes to d6. The king is safe. It's going for a walk. Bishop takes f5. Now look at white's pieces. They're all protecting each other, but they don't have a clear target. I mean, when you have a set of pieces working together, they are looking for targets in the enemy's position, in particular the king or enemy's pawns. That's not the case here, and black can therefore just continue with his own ideas. Queen takes b2. It's another big pawn, and also that pawn on a3 is really weak. White tried here f4, looking for counterplay, but black takes another pawn, and these 4 pawns, how are you ever going to stop them? So here black is in really good shape. King f2 played to defend the pawn on g3, but here the pawn is going to run. The a-pawn is basically out of reach. The rook and the bishop, they are long-range pieces, but they cannot really stop the pawn at all. Knight e5 played, a4, rook f7. So here you're attacking the pawn. Maybe there's a potential check on d7, but the queen goes to b2 with check. King f1. And here you gotta be careful. I mean, you would wish you could just push your a-pawn and then it will even be, you get a new queen with mate. But if you do play here this move a3, white was playing for this little trick with rook d7 check, king c5, knight d3 with a knight fork, and white is completely back in the game. So no reason to complicate matters here. You give another check first, that's fine. The bishop goes back to d3, counter-attacking the queen on b5, but the queen goes to b3. Now the bishop is no longer in the attack. The king is safe. There's no immediate threat. Bishop went back to f5, in fact. But now it's time to run with the pawn. Knight d3 played. And here again, one final little trick, if you can call it a trick at all. Because if you do advance your pawn to a2, and it's all of a sudden rook d7 with checkmate, as the knight is covering the c5 and the e5 square, the bishop is protecting the rook. That's something black should not allow. But can you see here the cleanest way to convert for black? And of course Magnus had seen this coming from afar. He can just stop the mating threat here by eliminating that annoying knight. Queen takes d3 with check. After the rook sacrifice, now it's also a queen sack. Bishop takes d3, and here the pawn comes to a2, and there's nothing white can do against the promotion of the a-pawn. The rook is on the 7th rank, is not allowed to come to a7 because the pawn on b7 is standing in the way. White captured it, a1 queen check, king e2, but now after queen g1, I mean, black has a huge material advantage. The pawns are absolutely weak, and of course this is not something you're gonna play out till the end against world's #1. The 2 pawns, they will be decisive later as well. So I thought this was both a very nice positional game as well, quite a good tactical performance by Magnus, who calculated well, neutralized all the enemy's threats, not fearing any sort of kingside attack, and converted very smoothly in this position with the material imbalance. So I thought this was probably Magnus his best game of the Olympiad so far. There are 3 more rounds to go, and well, we can expect more fireworks from Magnus and all the other top guys. So if you would like to follow more of the Olympiads action, make sure once again to hit the subscribe button, and you help the channel to grow further. Thanks for that.